Welcome to Tantrums and Tabletops. I saw that Simon did a top 10 board games of his childhood. I'm lazy and I'm going to do a top 5 video games of my childhood. He's Ben.
You're Tom.
Let's get to it.
Number 5.
At number 5 is Fable. Released in September of 2004 from Lionhead Studios. As you can see here, I have the Xbox Classics version. For a very specific reason. It would be known as the complete edition of Fable, The Lost Chapters, with extra bonus game content afterwards.
So I never had an Xbox. I was a PlayStation boy through and through. So what about Fable was special? I remember people playing it. I remember something about kicking chickens.
There is indeed a chicken kicking contest in it.
That wouldn't wash anymore.
Oh, yes, I think it'd still wash. It would still wash. Oh, Peter wouldn't be happy though.
Peter?
Is it Peter?
Peter Griffin?
Peter Griffin. This game is just so quintessentially British. It even has regional dialects. So if you're in one part of the world and travel several hours to get to a different part of the world, they sound different. It's like the difference between the English accent and the Welsh accent. It was so just British. It's hard to describe. The designer, Peter Molyneux, promised a lot of things with this game. He didn't deliver on all of them, but what he did deliver on was charm. You're a hero, and you are free to forge your own legend, be it through acts of altruism or nefarious deeds.
So is it an open world RPG?
No, it's semi-open world. You have sections in it where there's like loading screens between each section because due to the hardware at the time. It is an old game now. Well, what did we say, 2004? So this is now 20 years old.
But it's not like a linear game. It's you have the option to go off and do what you want. Is there a main quest?
There is a main quest, and there's many side quests in it where you can basically forge your own legend.
Okay.
If you want to be evil, people will flee from you in terror, and your visage or visage, depending on how you pronounce it, will change. Okay. So if you perform only good deeds, you will have butterflies, white butterflies around you, and a halo, and your aura will glow. If you go around killing people, you'll start to grow demon horns, and your complexion will turn grey, and your eyes will turn slowly red, like a really Sith.
Okay, that's pretty cool. The path you take does have an impact on the outcome of the game.
You have a good ending and a bad ending.
Right.
When it comes down to it, there is one choice. You can either save this person or kill that person, and it will dictate the ending of the game.
Okay.
But going through it, you play the game how you want.
Okay.
If you want to go up and fart at people, you can go up and fart at people. There is a context-sensitive button to do that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
A lot of people think the sequel was better, Fable 2, which came out on the Xbox 360. Personally, I didn't like the sequel, mainly because of the controls. It felt very floaty when your character ran around. It felt like they were skidding across the surfaces, but in this game, you felt like you were solid and your movements had impact, your weapon swings had impact. It's just...
So again, I never played the sequels either. I'm sure I'll get a lot of heat for that, but
it's fine. I didn't have a PS2 until long after its heyday. Same with the GameCube. I was Xbox and then Xbox 360, and then I went through 5 Xbox 360s due to the Red Ring of Death, and then I eventually bought a PlayStation 3. This was back in the day when you got books with your video games. Yes, children. Books. You had to read things. An excellent game, very charming. Fable: The Lost Chapters. If you haven't played it, you can pick it up on Steam to play on PCs, and they did a revamped, remastered version for Xbox 360 and came out on Steam as well. Highly recommend, just for the British charm alone.
Number 4.
At number 4, we have Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I bought this on the original Xbox also. Came out September 16th, 2003, and was developed by BioWare. BioWare are famous now for doing the Mass Effect trilogy and then messing it up with Mass Effect 4 Andromeda.
Okay. So again, another Xbox game. So not one that I would have had the opportunity to play.
You missed out on so much. But then again, you're not a big Star Wars fan.
I enjoy the films for what they are, but I'm not one of the people who's really into all the canon and the lore and who gets deeply into everything.
Well, then I've got some interesting stuff for you
Okay.
with this game. The problem with trying to bring a Star Wars to the video game format, especially if you're following the canon, you have to stick it in the Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
So you have this kind of 60-year period to mess around with. You can't really do much with it without affecting the canon.
Yeah.
So what BioWare did was they set their game almost 4,000 years beforehand and told a sprawling epic
Okay, so
of the Jedi, when the Jedi were everywhere and the Sith were everywhere, before the rule of two. If you know your Star Wars lore, you know what I mean. It left it wide open to tell whatever they wanted to tell.
so they said it far enough in the past, didn't reference like the known and loved characters, so they could tell their own story without having that time travel paradox where you change one thing here and it changes everything in the future or in the past.
No.
They've done their own standalone story.
Standalone story.
Okay.
There was a sequel to it as well, called The Sith Lords.
Right.
But this is the better of the two. The Sith Lords wasn't made by BioWare, it was made by Obsidian, who you might recognise as, I believe they were the guys who made Fallout New Vegas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. A great game.
Still, yeah. Sith Lords still a brilliant game, but Knights of the Old Republic is the better of the two.
What about it caught your attention? What do you love about it?
This game is a heavily influenced RPG game.
Okay.
It's not like your, like say for instance, I did a video on the Jedi Survivor.
Yes.
You're playing as Cal Kestis. You're a good guy. That's all you can be. In this, you start off as a nobody. You work your way up to becoming a Jedi, and then you can use any Jedi powers you want. You can fall to the dark side if you want to. You can fire lightning bolts across the room at the enemies. And it also influences the party members around you because it's very similar to Final Fantasy with its turn-based combat.
Okay.
You pause, you select who you're going to attack, and then you let the game play out in real time. And then you can pause the game again and select all your attacks. And very similar to what would be a modern game similar to it, but not
South
exactly.
Park, The Stick of Truth.
Yeah, it could be actually. I was going to say Baldur's Gate 3, but sure, we'll go with South Park, The Stick of Truth.
Well, if it isn't Cal's laptop, the traitor douchebag.
That's the level of gameplay that I'm at.
At least you didn't say The Fractured Butthole, because I
That's-
didn't think that
That's
game
a great
was
game as well.
I didn't think it was as good. I didn't think it was as good. I didn't even finish that one, but I
Any
finished The
game
Stick of
that
Truth.
has a shit simulator in it is a winner.
Yeah, but in Stick of Truth, you can foosh radar and fart on people.
Wow.
The level of freedom in this game was really unheard of at the time, especially for a licensed game. Star Wars is a big IP. If you wanted to be a bounty hunter, there's a side quest for that where you go around the galaxy hunting down bounties, and it turns out you've been taking out these nefarious individuals for
Okay.
the head bounty hunter, and then he comes after you because you're the only one that's left,
That's pretty cool.
and then you kick his ass.
Nice.
Yes.
So what was the reaction from the fandom to this? Because as Star Wars fans are pretty rabid. Star Wars fans and wrestling fans are pretty much, and Kiss fans are pretty much the most die-hard fan bases there are. You enjoyed it. Was it enjoyed by the wider fan base?
I'd like to say this was universally loved.
Okay. You'd like to.
I'd like to say that. I'm sure I'm wrong. Everyone I spoke to about this game holds it in high regard. It even got its own spin-off a while later called Star Wars The Old Republic, which is an MMORPG.
Nice.
And that is still going to today.
Number 3.
Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines. This is the only PC game, other than Age of Empires 2, I really played back in my childhood.
In your childhood?
In my childhood.
Tom, that's
More-
an 18 certificate game.
I feel like I'm going to get a slap on the wrist. There we
You
go.
pass that on to the people that let you play this game.
Vampire: The Masquerade is based upon a tabletop role-playing game originally from White Wolf Studios, later bought out by Paradox Interactive, and it's based around Dungeons and Dragons rules. I have with me the 5th edition rulebook for Vampire the Masquerade. One of the main differences I've noticed between the board game and the computer game, is how currency works. In this, you get money to buy weapons and armor and get your way into places, etc., like you would do in a normal video game. In the Masquerade, even though I haven't played any of it yet, I've noticed that the currency tends to be favors or boons.
Okay.
So, because you're an immortal being, currency probably has no real meaning to you at all. So, but if you can curtail favors from people, that means more.
I know we're talking about the computer game, and
Yes.
you've not played the RPG yet. Is it like a LARP, like a live action role play, or is it like D&D where you play it with figures?
You can play it either way.
Okay.
You can
cool.
play this all as theatre of the mind, or if you want to set up a board where you have characters moving around, you can do. You still do the checks that you would do, like you would do in D&D, but it would be to specific traits from your vampire clan. The game was a third and first person action game, so if you were attacking with a melee weapon, it'd be third person. You can beat the crap out of villains with a sledgehammer in it if you want to. Or you can pour all your skills and traits into firearms and shoot in first person for the whole of the game. The game came out in November 16th, 2004. It was kind of sent out to die because it came out, which is a pun for a vampire game. It was released more or less around the same time that Half-Life 2 was released. It was released in a buggy, broken state.
Did they just push this out knowing that people would have bought Half-Life?
They were forced to put it out. I mean, you can see the name on the front there, which is Activision. If you know your history, the guys who were making this Troika game sadly went under. This was I think the third game that they'd made. It didn't make the money back. The company had to fold.
You say this is a sequel. Do you play the other ones?
I did. Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, which was the first game,
Yeah.
was more akin to a point-and-click Diablo game.
Okay.
This was trying to be something different.
Yeah.
Now, I say that the company folded. This game still has people modding and patching it to this day. It has a cult following. There's people who are so passionate about this game, and mainly for one reason: the writing.
Okay.
The writing is just excellent. You have so much choice with how you want to express your character in it. You start off as a fledgling vampire. You choose from one of 7 clans to begin the game with. You can be a Bruja, you can be a Toreador, you could be a Malkavian, you could be a Nosferatu.
Are these different types of vampires, or are they families or something?
These are families of vampires that have specific traits. So a Bruja would be...
Is he like a bit of a dude?
The Bruja would be the muscle, be your tank, if you were in in Final Fantasy terms.
Yeah.
The Ventru and the Toreador the Ventru are more like high class vampires. They roam in the highest of circles in society. For example, if you are a Ventru, you cannot feed on rats. Rats are an inexhaustible blood supply around the cities you roam in.
Yeah.
But if you're a Ventru and you feed on one of the rats, you'll vomit.
Because you're a high class.
Because you're high class.
Okay, that's cool. So there's sort of limits and buffs and debuffs.
Buffs and
if
debuffs.
that's the right
yeah,
term.
no, that's correct. That's
yeah.
cool, man. Everything has a kind of like the pluses and the minuses to the character. The girl on the front of the cover is a Malkavian vampire.
Right.
Which means she is cursed with... Most of them are cursed with insanity. And the whole game was rewritten if you choose to play as a Malkavian. If you play as one of the other 6 vampire clans, it more or less... The choices and options more or less play out the same way. But if you play as a Malkavian, you could encounter a stop sign, for example, where you just go past it and the stop sign says stop, and your character just goes, "No, you stop!" and starts having conversations because they're insane.
Okay.
This is a whole section of the game you could miss if you didn't play as the Malkavians.
Okay, so there's subplots and sub-levels to it, so you could play one where you can play another, so there's replayability.
There's endless replayability to this game, especially if you play as either the Malkavian or the Nosferatu. If you play as the Nosferatu, they're your typical, you know, like, remember the old, that really old Nosferatu movie?
Yes.
And he kind of looks like a vampire with the pointy teeth
Yes.
and ears. This is what those vampires look like.
Okay.
And they can't go above ground. They can't be seen by humans.
And you, my fugly friend, are gonna have it extra hard. A little effort and the rest of us can blend in okay. The sighting of your hideous ass hits the internet and it's all over. There's a reason most Nosferatu smell like the sewer. Figure it out.
Because the subtitle, The Masquerade, is the main rule. If you break the masquerade, vampires are a secret society. Humans aren't supposed to know about it. The vampires are pulling the strings in the background. And no, they don't want to be known of.
Okay.
But if you're a Nosferatu, you put all your points into being stealthy and not being seen, being able to disappear. You'll have a lot more points, a lot more bonuses to, say, your hacking ability. To get information out of computers will be easier.
Okay, so it's not set in the old times,
It's set in modern day America. One of the most famous levels of it is actually a haunted house.
Okay.
Which is, in video games, is really hard to do because you're controlling what happens, really. So if you're not scared, you're not scared. But this house genuinely scared me so much, so I had to mute the sound.
Right.
Because the music was invoking fear in me because they'd written it so well.
Yeah, they've created that atmosphere and the tension within the game.
A perfect kind of melting pot in this just one level.
Nice.
Terrifying.
Nice.
Vampire the Masquerade can be played on modern day computers with a patch available online, I think from Nexus Mods. There's an old saying that goes around on the internet. Every time someone utters the phrase Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, someone, somewhere in the world, reinstalls it.
Maybe it'll be me.
Number 2.
The classic Legend of Zelda for the Nintendo 64. Now, as you can see, I only have the cartridge. Sadly, I lost the book and the box to the ravages of time. The box was cardboard and didn't really last very well.
No, they were the old sort of just like a cardboard box
It
with
was
the
a
book that
cardboard
slid in,
box
didn't
that
they?
slid in. It was, you know, all biodegradable.
And funnily enough, contained probably 90% of the second-hand value of these games as well.
It did indeed. But luckily, there was re-releases of it. This is a collector's edition for the GameCube, which comes with the first 2 original Legend of Zelda games, The Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link, Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. I managed to pick this up on eBay, but it didn't have a case. It just had the disc and the book. And I printed off my own cover for it and messed up the size specifics so it doesn't fit correctly.
I did wonder if Nintendo's quality control went out the window a little bit there. The cute thing a lot of people may not remember about, I say, if you're watching this, you're probably of a certain vintage like us and you remember the classic consoles. But the GameCube had teeny tiny discs.
It ran on mini discs. It was the only console of that
Well,
time not to adopt DVDs.
Mini CDs, not
Mini
micro
CDs.
discs.
I said mini discs.
Yeah, mini discs were.
Oh,
a
you mean
separate
like
thing.
the sort? Sorry, okay. Micro CDs, we'll call it that. We don't want any infringement on Sony. There was also a remake of Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time for the 3DS. Why this hasn't been ported to the Nintendo Switch, I do not know. Nintendo, that is money left on the table because this would sell.
Is the N64 version available in the Game Pass?
It is.
Yeah, so you can play it on your modern consoles, but you have to spend an extra however much a month to play it online.
It's £35 a year.
He knows.
I know. This, though, is kind of like it's a remake and also like a high definition remake. I'm not sure what engine it's running in, but it plays really well. Sadly, it is locked to the 3DS, which is a handheld console and can't be played on a big TV without nefarious means.
Could the Wii or the Wii U play
It's-
DS games?
No, because it's a cartridge.
I wasn't sure if
that
they had
size.
cartridge ports on them.
It's
Again,
a cartridge that size.
PlayStation boy through and through. I only got a Nintendo console when I married Mrs. Smith, and we got the Switch.
It's a good console, though, isn't it?
It is good.
Great fun.
So what made you put this game at number 2? Why did you love this game so much?
This game was my first real introduction to a 3D adventure game.
Okay.
There's a little story, mainly centered around my dad. Me and him bonded over video games. Still talk about video games now. He loves his VR headset. He has the Meta Quest 2. Loves playing games on that, especially the Time Crisis clones. Back in the day, he had a PlayStation before I did, and I'd go and see him at the weekends. Christmas was coming. He knew I was getting my own PlayStation, so he sold his PlayStation and bought a Nintendo 64. So
Okay.
I had a PlayStation at home, and then I had Nintendo 64 when I came to see him. Looking back on it is his way of, showing affection, which is really nice. He bought Mario and he bought Zelda with it, and I think we had Wave Racer 64 as well. But I was so invested in this Legend of Zelda game. I think if I remember correctly, I used to play it all the time when we went to Toys R Us, because they had the old booths set up, and they'd have a console there plugged on the whole time, and you could just run around and play it. I think that may have inspired him to get it.
A lot of people give computer games, they rot your brain, they're not good for your kids, blah, blah, blah. But that kind of proves that there is a really nice, like almost a touching side to them as well, because it's something that you and your dad bonded over, so it brought you close together. Whereas, some parents are like, oh, my kid spends too much time playing the games or whatever, but for you two, that was a really special thing, and that's really nice.
Well, yeah, the difference is back then as well, there wasn't this online connectivity that you have today. I mean, if the parents don't understand, they don't get that the kids are playing with their friends most of the time. If all the kids are playing Fortnite together, they're probably discussing it at school, going home and trying to get the highest score on it, or as many kills as they can.
And all getting rickets because they're not getting enough sunlight.
The Legend of Zelda tells an epic story of good versus evil. This has magic, time travel, adventure with memorable characters and catchy themes and songs that have been loved and admired for over 2 decades. Everyone talks about the levels and the atmosphere and the dungeons, everything that was in this game. It was all stellar, but my favourite part was going to the fishing hole. I spent many, many hours trying to catch the legendary Hylian Loach. Sounds daft, but if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I mean. It was that fat fish that was right at the bottom of the pond. The fishing hole was addictive. You've got this epic sprawling game with all these dungeons and these weapons and all this magic to use, and I wasted all my time at the fishing hole.
There you go.
Very therapeutic, that fishing hole.
He could have gone out and done fishing in real life, but that.
Nope.
You're going to sit in front of the TV and try and catch a big fat loach.
I still love fishing games to this day, actually. I play one on my phone quite a bit. I'm quite sad that there's no fishing games in the newest Zelda games. So Breath of the Wild, even though it's a couple of years old now, and Tears of the Kingdom both don't have fishing games in it.
Okay.
This is also the prequel to what I think is the best Legend of Zelda game, which would have been Twilight Princess. This is going to piss a lot of Zelda fans off. It is the best Zelda game. It's dark, it's atmospheric, it has a more adult tone to it. The other Zelda game that came out on the GameCube at the time was Wind Waker, which was cel-shaded and kind of cartoony, chibi style.
Yeah.
I've never finished that game.
Was it too hard for you?
No, it wasn't hard. It wasn't hard. I couldn't get into it. I understand there's a lot of Zelda. Zelda is a rabid fandom.
Yes.
And people will debate for hours on end the meanings behind the games. But I just couldn't get into Wind Waker. I've tried several times. I have 2 versions of it. I have the original version on GameCube. I have the HD remaster on Wii U. Twilight Princess just trumps it every time. And it has fishing in it.
That's why. It's all about the fishing.
Honorable mentions.
So I know at the start of the video you said it was a top 5 list, but you also had a few honourable mentions.
Yeah, because I couldn't find enough games that I actually owned to make it a top 10 list. And top 8 list doesn't have a good ring to it. First of the honourable mentions is Resident Evil 2.
Oh, now you're talking.
Originally released on PlayStation 1 in April 29th, 1998. I have the GameCube version of it, which was released on May 30th of 2003. Yeah.
So this is your honourable mention.
Yes.
This game is my absolute favourite computer game from my childhood.
Yeah?
Yeah, the PlayStation 1 version of this, when I was in, I don't know what year it was of high school, it must have been year 10, but that I had an agreement with my parents that if I got good enough results on my report card, they would get me that game.
And how old were you back then?
Old enough to play it.
Are you sure?
Just about.
So you give me earlier for playing a game I shouldn't have done?
But, you know, this game is just fantastic, and I'm sure you're going to go into it in a second, but the fact that you had the two characters, the interweaved stories, complete one scenario to get to the next one, and the way that they interplayed with each other, it's just fantastic. And then the remake as well, which I'm sure you're going to get to, just blew it out the park again. It was just... It was, you know, I'm struggling to find the words for just how good this game is.
It improved on the original in every way possible and surpassed it. There are people clamoring around the internet to see the original version of Resident Evil 2, which is dubbed Resident Evil 1.5 with Elsa Walker in it instead of Claire Redfield. I have seen some of the playable areas on that on PC, and it doesn't look as good.
With 1.5, there was rumour that the amount of zombies on screen was actually higher than Resident Evil 2. So they could fit... I don't know if it's because the graphics were not as good, or if it was... I don't understand the technicalities of computer games, but there was something in it that meant the hordes of zombies on screen would be bigger than what we ended up with in Resident Evil 2.
But it could have been pushing the hardware too much and they had to scale back. You've got to remember, this is back on the PlayStation 1 days. This is still the infancy of 3D video gaming.
Just to say, as an honourable mention for you, for me, that was the absolute pinnacle until Fallout 3 came out. Actually, Fallout 3 knocked Resident Evil 2 off as being my favourite game.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, we've jumped a few years into the future for that. But yeah, so that's my story about Resident Evil 2.
Special. There is one thing I could add to that, actually.
Okay.
To tie it back to what this channel mainly does, Resident Evil 2 was made into a board game based upon the original Resident Evil 2 and not the remake from Steam Forged Games. Characters and the figurines, the artwork from the game is all from the original Resident Evil 2. I think this came out, I'm not sure of the year, but this probably came out before the remake was announced. I mean, we were clamouring for that remake for years, weren't we?
Yes.
Would you say the original Resident Evil 2 is the better game, or the remake is the better game?
I think nostalgia factor plays a lot into it for me, in that I just have such fond memories of the original, but just the look of the remake may pip it. Some of the way they've modified the gameplay slightly, where you go and find Kendo, that part was different, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. So it kept you on your toes a little bit with the remake, but because obviously if a game you're used to it point A to point Z and you can play it all the way through, there's no challenge if they remake it and it's exactly the same. So the fact that there was some difference in there really made that special to me. I don't know about you, what did you prefer?
What I prefer is being able to shoot and move at the same time.
Yes, because the original was quite tank control still, wasn't it?
The original was tank controls, but as soon as you raised your gun, you were routed to the spot. In the remake, you can raise your gun and your movement slows down, but you can still move. You can back away slowly. Next on the list of honourable mentions is Final Fantasy VIII. Now this will be an unpopular opinion amongst many Final Fantasy fans. I can already see you turning your nose and grinning slightly through it.
Yeah, carry on.
This was the first Final Fantasy game I ever played.
Okay. So you missed 7. You went straight to 8.
I bought 8.
Yeah.
I didn't play 7. I really related to the main character.
Okay.
Squall Leonhardt is a bit of a loner. I had no friends growing up, really. Oh, woe is me. Look at what I've been left with now.
One like, one friend for Tom. Click the button.
I really related to the guy. His lone wolf attitude, his lone wolf persona really resonated with me. It was also one of the first games I played where a love story was also the central theme of the game.
Okay.
And the big twist ending of Disc 1 that is still discussed to this day is, did he die? Is the rest of the game just a fleeting daydream, as life leaves his body. Spoilers.
Spoiler for me, I'd never played Final Fantasy 8. I had it, but I played 7, and then I played some of 9, but for some reason I never played 8.
7 is the most iconic one, especially since it's been given the full remake treatment at the moment. 8 is kind of forgotten about. It is viewed as the black sheep of the series, especially because of the junctioning system on it. It was very difficult to get your head around at first. It was all based around magic. So if you junctioned certain spells, you'd up your attack or up your healing ability. If you junctioned like the best healing spell in the game to your stats, it boosted your health. It did have the time-honoured tradition from Final Fantasy games of back then of the FMV cut sequence to hide those pesky loading times, and most of them were pretty damn epic. There was always a fight going on, or there was a poignant moment going on between Squall and Rinoa. I even named my daughter after her. It's just an epic game, and I know it's not every Final Fantasy fan's favourite, but it is mine. Finally, on the list of honourable mentions is Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. Released in September 8th of 1999 and from Crystal Dynamics. An excellent twist on the vampire genre. As we've spoken earlier, I'm a big fan of vampire games, especially Vampire the Masquerade. This was a different take on it. This was viewing vampires as more kind of mythical beasts, and it is set in its own land of Nosgoth. It is a sequel to Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, which was a very Diablo-esque style game, whilst this is a third-person action-adventure Metroidvania style game. Do you know what a Metroidvania game is, Ben?
Is it a game that's based on the stylings of Metroid and Castlevania?
It is. Do you know what that means?
No. Metroid is I know it's a Nintendo game.
Yes, and Castlevania was a Nintendo game for a while as well. Metroid and Castlevania had a style of game where you had to acquire a certain item to unlock a new area and proceed in the game. In this, you would unlock new abilities for your vampiric self to cross into new areas of the game. And he was very good at that. The writing was very Shakespearean. Very Shakespearean. Some of the interactions between the two main characters, that being of Kain and Raziel, or Raziel, however you want to pronounce it, it's excellent. It was written by Amy Hennig. If you don't know that name, she is the woman who gave us the Uncharted trilogy.
Nathan Drake.
Nathan Explosion.
God, Bob, that's brutal.
It is Nathan Drake, yes, and those games are excellent, based around Tomb Raider and Indiana Jones.
Naughty Dog made those games.
Naughty Dog made
Better
those
known
games.
nowadays for Last of Us.
Yes,
And before that, Crash Bandicoot.
but this is where she cut her teeth, really. This is just an excellently written game for back in the time, and told a story you wouldn't get these days because no one takes risks anymore.
Number 1.
My number one favourite game of all time, and still is probably my number one favourite game because I play it every year without fail, even though I play the remake, not the original, is Metal Gear Solid. And I have my original copy that my mother bought me all them years ago when my sister stepped on my copy of Tekken 3 and made it unreadable.
I think it's an upgrade, to be honest.
Yeah, my mum felt guilty and she bought me this, and I actually had it a few weeks before it came out in the shop as well, as she special ordered it.
Nice.
It came to the door, came with a memory card and the Silent Hill original demo.
Yes.
Epic. An excellent action-adventure game, but mainly a stealth game. It reintroduced stealth games to the masses. There wouldn't be Splinter Cell without Metal Gear Solid.
No, it's definitely genre-defining in many ways, right?
Yeah, there wouldn't be Assassin's Creed without Prince of Persia. There wouldn't be Prince of Persia without inspiration from Metal Gear Solid. Made by Konami and released in the UK back in February 1999. This was back when games were released at different times. There was-
Japanese market would often get it before, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would. The Japanese market would get it first, then the American market, and then us, we were the European market, would get it later. The main man behind it, the legend himself, Hideo Kojima. You don't really, if you know who he is, I don't really need to speak about him. An absolute legend in the industry. Brought us the Metal Gear Solid franchise, also brought us the excellent Death Stranding. If you haven't played that, you should do. Made me cry. This game was later completely remade into Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes, which came out on GameCube March 26th, 2004.
So I never played this one because I never had a GameCube. Very familiar with the PS1 version. So what was the differences between...
Okay, the best way to describe this, did you ever play Metal Gear Solid 2?
Yes.
This is the story of Metal Gear Solid 1 with Metal Gear Solid 2's graphics.
Okay, so they rebuilt from the ground up almost.
Rebuilt from the ground up. You had the first person shooting, you had a tranquilizer gun. One of the biggest differences though was the cutscenes. Everything was redone from the ground up to be more of an action epic and utilised a lot of the bullet time camera effects.
Which were very popular at the
Which
time.
were very popular at the time. Unpopular opinion is that no one likes this game in the fandom. They think it is the black sheep. A lot of fans don't realise that this is probably the game that Hideo Kojima wanted to make, because Silicon Knights, the producers, the developers, of this game, did all the cutscenes as they were done in the original Metal Gear Solid game, and Hideo Kojima scrapped them and said he wanted them to be a more action-based epic, and brought in guys who were famous for doing bullet time and put it into the game.
Okay, so if that's more of the game that he wanted to make, is that made possible by not having the limitations of the PS1 hardware at the
That
time?
would be true, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not very well known, but the GameCube was probably the most powerful console of that generation. Just look at the Resident Evil remake, and
Fantastic.
Rogue Squadron 2 came out around the same time. When the trailer was released for that at the E3 press conference of that year, a lot of journalists thought that the footage was doctored. It was that good.
Wow.
So the GameCube was a little machine that could.
This has recently been re-released again. There was a version on the PS Vita. There's
Yeah.
a PS5 remake or re-release that's just come out as well. So
they've
it's the
done
game that keeps giving, right?
Yes, it is. Sadly, with the remastered Volume 1 of Metal Gear Solid, they have given us this version, the PS1 version, and it is very pixelated when stretched over modern TVs. What they really should have done was given us the PC version of that, where it's smooth polygons, can run at a faster frame rate. You should really be getting games that are locked to 60 frames a second now for these old games. Me and you actually have a link over the Metal Gear Solid franchise, don't we, Ben?
So, yeah, obviously jumping a few games ahead. I'm familiar with the franchise. I never played number 3.
You missed out.
I did miss out. I'm going to play the remake. But when number 4 came out at the time, having a low-paid menial job, you were actually kind enough that you bought that game for me. I did pay you back, but eventually. But yeah, you bought that game and we played it at your house, didn't we?
Yeah, we dragged your absolute Goliath of a PlayStation 3 round my place, plugged it in, and were blown away by that game.
The cutscenes in that, the one with Ocelot,
Yeah.
all this, when all the soldiers just shooting away.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. The piece at the end, mashing the triangle button with Snake crawling through the
Hall of Microwaves.
the microwave tube or whatever it was. Heart-wrenching at the time.
It was.
But that game was phenomenal. The whole series is just brilliant.
We wouldn't have that game if it wasn't for what was started in this.
No, and going back to this one as well, there were some little tricks in there at the time that people are probably familiar with, such as when you're fighting Psycho Mantis, the fact that he could read your memory card and he would tell you what kind of a player you were based on how often you'd saved. It would reference other games that were on your memory card, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it would.
And then there was the sneaky way to beat him when the screen would go dark and it would flash the message Hideo, obviously for Kojima.
Yep.
But you could switch your controller to the other port and he wouldn't be able to see where you were. He would be blind to you, so you could then defeat him by playing in controller port 2.
In his terms, I can't read you. It was very ahead of its time. And also, another way to link back to what we do on this channel, The creators at CMON, C-M-O-N,
Come on!
or come on, as Ben would say, this year are releasing a board game based on the first Metal Gear Solid video game. I have it pre-ordered. Stay tuned for a review and unboxing of said board game.
Thank you for taking me on that journey through your top 5 games of your childhood with the honourable mentions as well. That was really interesting to get your insights on those.
Lifelong video game player. It's not going to change.
Gamers tan and gamers physique. So that was, yeah, I can't talk.
Thanks for watching the video. Thanks for putting up with my ramblings. If you like what we do, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, show a friend.
That's it for this one. We'll see you in the next one.
Welcome to Tantrums and Tabletops, where we're going to do a list video because we're real YouTubers. You keep on putting Z-list YouTuber on all your videos.
I do. Pretty soon we're going to move up to Y-list.
Y-list? What, why are we
When
here?
we hit 400 subs, we're going to be Y-list YouTubers. 500 will take us to X.
X-list.
We're going to have a graph working our way up.